You ever come home early from a trip tired, dusty, dreaming of your own bed, and maybe a quiet sunset only to find a woman with bolt cutters kneeling by your power box, halfway through cutting the main line to your entire ranch? Because I have. And let me tell you, there's no amount of army training that prepares you for seeing someone you barely know about to sever your barn's electricity like she's trimming weeds in her own backyard. "Ma'am, step away from the power box," I shouted as I jumped out of my truck. I hadn't even turned off the engine yet. 6-hour drive from Albuquerque, still humming under the hood, and my boots crunched down over the gravel hard. There she was, Deborah Manning, 62 years old, HOA president of the Silver Rock subdivision half a mile away, and the single most entitled person I've ever met in my life. She spun around like a raccoon caught in a bird feeder, wire cutters still and handies wide behind those huge, bug-eyed sunglasses. "You're trespassing," she screeched, pointing the cutters at me like a dagger. "This is an HOA matter. You weren't supposed to be back until Monday." I couldn't believe it. "You're cutting my power, Deborah." Her hand trembled as she fumbled for her phone. And just like that, I watched her punch in 911, raise it to her ear, and say, "Yes, I'm at Riverbend Ranch. A dangerous man just pulled up. He has a gun. He's threatening me. Please send help." She was calling the cops on me in my own land. Now, before I tell you how that played out, let me back up and explain how we even got to this mess. Name's Colton Barrett. I'm 39, former Army medic. I came back from overseas in 2015 and used my savings to restore the family ranch, 40 acres outside Santa Fe, that had been in my mother's name. I wasn't looking for trouble, just space, quiet, and a place to raise horses and maybe learn the art of doing nothing. And for 5 years, that's exactly what I had, until the Silver Rock development popped up down the road. You know the kind. Gated driveways. Perfectly identical white mailboxes. Rules about everything: mailbox height, lawn color, wind chimes. I wasn't in their jurisdiction. I wasn't even adjacent. But that didn't stop Deborah Manning from acting like I was a blemish on her perfect little HOA spreadsheet. She hated my goats. Hated the red paint on my barn. Said my tractor was an eyesore. Sent me letters I never asked for and warnings she had no right to give. When I didn't show up to her HOA welcome mixer, she left a flyer in my chicken coop. When I replaced my fence with split cedar, she called it a visual disruption. But I tried to be civil. I planted extra trees. I built a taller fence. I muted the windmill chimes when her guests complained. I even bought blackout covers for the barn lights. All that, and she still found something to whine about. So when I left town for 2 days to attend a veterans charity event, I didn't think much of it. My buddy Trey, who works with the sheriff's office, was going to keep an eye on the place, but his mom had an emergency, and he had to fly out last minute. I figured, what's the worst that could happen in 48 hours? Well, apparently, Deborah had a schedule of her own. Because when I pulled back into the drive, sun just dipping below the hills, sky going that beautiful Santa Fe orange, and noticed 2 things. 1, the floodlight on my barn was flickering. And 2, Deborah's silver Lexus was parked right next to my power box like it was her reserved spot. That's when I found her, bolt cutters in hand, cutting my damn electricity. And that brings us back to the moment she called the cops. I stayed calm. Arizona's an open carry state. I had a sidearm, yeah, but I never reached for it. I put my hands where they could see, just like I was taught. "Deborah, you're making a mistake," I said, my voice low. "No," she spat. "You made a mistake coming home early." And then I heard the sirens. 5 minutes later, 2 sheriff cruisers turned up my gravel road, dust kicking up behind them. Deborah was waving them down like she was stranded on an island, yelling and pointing and doing her best pageant contestant routine. "There. That's him. That's the man I told you about." The older deputy, broad shoulders, sunglasses, calm as a monk, approached first. The younger one kept a hand near his belt. "Sir, hands where we can see them," the older one said. I raised my arms. "Name's Colton Barrett. This is my land. She's trespassing. She's saying you threatened her with a weapon," the younger deputy added. "Only thing I threatened her with," I said, "was a cease and desist if she cut my power again." Then the older officer glanced at the wire shaft severed. Saw the cutters in her hand. The Lexus parked crooked on my land. "Ma'am," he said, "did you cut these?" "I was preventing a fire hazard," she declared. "Those lights have been flickering for weeks. We've had complaints." "From who?" I asked. "The squirrels?" Now here's the twist. Deborah thought she'd cut all the power. But what she didn't know was that I had a solar-charged backup system wired into a birdhouse nearby, connected to my surveillance camera. And it caught everything. I pulled out my phone. "Officers, I have footage." Her eyes went wide. "You're bluffing," she muttered. I showed them the clip. There she was, in HD, pulling up, getting out, walking over with those clippers, and calling 911, all of it. Right there on camera. And then she lunged. Tried to slap the phone out of my hand. But the officer caught her wrist midair. Mayim stepped back. And then she flipped the switched ears, gasping, grabbing her face. "He assaulted me. He hit me. He threatened me with surveillance." The younger deputy rolled his eyes. "Ma'am, we just saw you lunge. We have it on body cam too." Her Oscar-worthy performance was falling flat. That's when I noticed something taped under the power box. I peeled it off. It was laminated, typed out in neat font. "Notice of violation, property paint non-compliance fine. $5,000 enforcement action approved by HOA President Manning." She wasn't just cutting my wires, she thought she was enforcing a fine. Physically. That night, flyers were tossed onto my porch. My mailbox was stuffed with violation summons. One even claimed my livestock exceeded HOA regulations. Problem was, I wasn't in their HOA. Never had been. My lawyer, Evelyn Rios, filed a restraining order the next morning. But I didn't stop there. I purchased the 5 acres directly behind Deborah's home. Quietly. Legally. I built a bee apiary and soil research lab, fully permitted, fully visible from her back porch. And every day, those bees hummed a little louder. Then came the lawsuit. Deborah sued for visual harassment and ecological nuisance. We countersued for trespass, false report, harassment. Her private HOA chat leaked plans to sabotage my power, gaslighting members into believing I was a threat. In court, the judge barely needed the evidence before dismissing her case entirely and issuing sanctions. Deborah was banned from HOA leadership for 5 years, charged with false 911 reporting. And when she tried to plead her case one last time, crying on the courthouse steps, the cameras were rolling. A week later, her husband, David, came to my gate, said she was entering psychiatric treatment, handed me a letter, shaking. It read, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just couldn't stand losing control. I'm sorry." And you know what? I believed her. Not because I forgave her, but because people like Deborah, they don't break, they unravel. So if you're still here, tell me, what would you do if someone tried to enforce their fantasy rules on your real life? Would you fight back? Stay quiet? Or would you let your bees do the talking? Leave a comment. Let's hear your story. And don't forget, sometimes the loudest HOA isn't the one with bylaws, it's the one that gets stung.